Britain, 1314. A land dominated by one kingdom. In the south, England rules the landscape. Yet, all is not ideal for the English kings. In the north, Scotland, a kingdom made up of chieftains and clans, has been holding out for years. The king on the English throne, Edward II, has a large throne to fill. His father, Edward I, did not gain the nickname Hammer of the Scots for naught. In a succession crisis in the 1290s, Edward had crushed Scottish resistance and brought military levies over the country, and in doing so brought the country to heel. Yet, after Edward I had left the country, resistance had sprung up, led by William Wallace. Wallace was a divisive figure, and despite winning victories for the Scots, others such as Robert the Bruce did not side with him. In 1305, he was betrayed and killed. Despite this, a year later, Robert killed his rival for the Scottish throne and assumed a position as King of Scotland. Over the next few years, despite initial English successes in the war between the English and Scots, it still raged on, and in 1307, Edward I moved north to put down Bruce's forces, and subsequently developed dysentery and died. With his death, Edward II took the throne of England, and despite wishing to finish the Scots, domestic problems prevented him from doing so, and by 1313, the English situation in Scotland looked dire. Robert, now firmly king, yet looking for a uniting force within his kingdom, had captured many of the English garrisons within Scotland, with one notable and important omission: the castle of Stirling. The castle that Wallace had taken years before, yet had slipped into the hands of the English and was now garrisoned by Sir Philip Mowbray. Edward de Bruce, brother to the king, soon put Stirling under siege. Mowbray, however, attempted to make a deal with Edward. If the castle was not relieved by the 24th of June 1314, Mowbray would surrender the castle. To avoid a siege, Edward agreed. Scottish forces remained close, and Edward II, seeing a chance to put down Scottish resistance once and for all, marched to relieve Stirling. The initial combat on the 23rd was light skirmishes. English cavalry, led by the Earl of Gloucester and Hereford, crossed the Bannockburn to the south and met with Bruce's forces. Edward's place in history is an interesting one. Before him was Edward I, who, already discussed, brutally controlled most of Britain. After him came Edward III, the first Plantagenet king to war France in the 100 Years' War. Edward would become unlucky in history, with great ancestors behind him and great predecessors before him. This is why the Bannockburn and the war against Scotland early in his reign became such a strong point for him. De Bruce, on the other hand, is an interesting character. Having united the Scottish throne finally, he still needed that one battle to rally the people behind his cause. The name De Bruce comes from a French family, De Bruce or De Bruys, derived from lands now called Brie, situated between Cherbourg and Valence in Normandy. The Robert de Bruce is perhaps the most famous of all of the Bruces, eventually leading Scotland in the War of Independence, and, of course, with the Battle of Bannockburn being so important for him as that one thing he needed to get the people behind his cause. With the English cavalry now engaged, all hope was on the cream of the English nobility. Yet, the pikes and uneven ground around the burn did not help the English cavalry in any way. These initial skirmishes between Bruce and Gloucester quickly went to the Scots, and the Scottish king, who in art and statues around Scotland is shown to be wearing the red rampant lion on a yellow background, fought in a one-to-one combat with Henry de Bohun, killing him in the process with a battle axe. Another force of English horsemen, this time led by Baron de Clifford, had tried to flank round, and yet met with more Scottish resistance. Within this force was Thomas de Grey of Heaton. His son would go right on to write the Scala Chronica. The father, Thomas, is recorded to have boasted that he would not flee from battle but into it. He was taken prisoner quickly, and soon the English forces pulled back. bloodied and beaten, the heavy English cavalry, who were meant to provide the power of the English army, could not beat the Scots and their pikes. They struggled back across the Bannockburn, and a defeat lowered the morale of the English forces. During the night, however, the English crossed a stream and set up their forces on the other side. Deserters from the English camp headed to the Scots to inform Robert of the low morale within the English. On the morning of the 24th, the English were across the Bannockburn and had set up on the other side. Edward had set up his heavy infantry in the front of his army with his longbowmen in the rear, a fatal mistake. The Scots were formed up into schiltrons, defensive circles formed of pikes and spears that would provide fully defensive positions for the outnumbered Scots to fight. On the morning, confident with news of the English morale, the Scots headed to the edge of the woods and prayed. The English were stunned by the tenacity of the Scots. Reports vary, but Edward cried they prayed for mercy, somehow believing that his fortunes had turned in the night. Yet a refute came back saying, they pray for mercy from God, not you. These men will conquer or die. The English knights and lords, however, were still impetuous and foolish, yet there was some sense within the English camp. Gloucester had tried to warn the king to postpone the battle, yet under goading pressure of the king, Gloucester led a charge. With little following him, the Earl was surrounded and killed. English footmen soon joined the battle, yet Scottish forces held firm and a tough fight ensued. The combat shown in artwork at the time shows not only swords but axes and hammers. These weapons became much more effective over the Middle Ages as armour became more advanced. The artwork also shows that many combatants are in mail, with Robert clearly in plate. This would perhaps go to suggest that many of the English earls and dukes probably wore similar armour. Swords, despite being in many films and TV shows as primary weapons, would have been ineffective against both plate and mail. The only real chance of a sword would be to stab the weak points of the armour, such as joints. Using weapons such as axes and hammers would cause trauma, such as broken bones, that would put a combatant out of action, to either be captured for ransom or slaughtered after the battle. One may have already noticed that there is a severe lack of kilts in this battle. This is because the kilt is a later invention and taken on by many late 18th century Scots and 19th century Scotsmen as a symbol of national pride. Edward tried to deploy his archers. However, due to the fight ensuing between the English footmen and Scots, he quickly held their fire in an attempt to prevent any friendly fire. The first real good move for the English king. He attempted a simple flanking manoeuvre with his archers to get shots into the Scottish position, yet despite this, the Earl of Moray countered this flank with the Scottish cavalry. Calling the Scots light cavalry may be a bit of misable, however. Many carried similar armour and weapons to the English, yet it would have been the horses who were smaller compared to the English war horses. The archers were soon routed by the Scots, and the beginning of the end was near for the English forces. Edward wished to stay in the fight, yet the Scottish schiltrons had ground down the English forces, and many on the English side could see that the battle was almost over. Almar de Valence, the Earl of Pembroke, and Giles de Argentan dragged the king away and sent him falling back with his royal bodyguard. The panic spread and the English forces were routed. On the retreat and the attempt to get to the border, many English were slain. The numbers of the dead for the English vary, but a common figure is around 11,000, out of the 16,000 they started the battle with. Within this 16,000, about 2,000 were English cavalry. The Argentan, claiming that due to never fleeing in battle, turned around and charged into the ranks of the Scots. The Scots lost about half their forces, yet they brought much less than half of the English forces to battle, with only around 7,000 men, most of them pikes and foot soldiers. Bannockburn is a symbol of Scottish pride. At the beginning of the video, I had the unofficial anthem, The Flower of Scotland, playing. The lyrics in The Flower of Scotland go on to tell the tale about the Battle of Bannockburn. Throughout Scotland and throughout places such as Stirling and Edinburgh, Robert the Bruce appears several times, whether in statues or in sculptures. The artwork surrounding the battle and the poetry is something of nationalistic pride. It is no wonder then that the Scottish independence referendum was held in the 700th anniversary of the Battle of Bannockburn. As a half Scot, half Englishman myself, the Battle of Bannockburn takes an interesting point. England at this time was a militaristic force, trying to rule England and Britannia with a solid iron fist. Yet Scotland had proved to be its downfall. Several hundred years later, an English monarch would be succeeded by a Scotsman on the English throne. In 1707, England and Scotland would come together to form Great Britain, and in 1801, the kingdoms of Great Britain and Ireland would unite to finally form the UK, sealing the bonds between British countries on all the Isles. I would like to take this time to thank Lucas for all the help he did in creating this video by playing the English army. Lucas, who were a fantastic Edward II, so thank you very much for that. I'd also like to thank the patrons who helped support this video, and if you too wish to support us, then head over to patreon.com/history3games. You can have a look at the rewards and go from there if you wish to support History 3 Games. Remember, I also have a Twitch account called LoadyPC, where I am currently doing a Sparta campaign on Rome 2, where I'm discussing various different things about Spartan and Greek history while I play it, and there's also LoadyPC Twitter as well if you want to go follow that, where I'll be starting to update a little bit more about what's coming up. The little hint about what might be coming in the future, I feel like I might do a series. So what I mean by a series is I will take a larger event through history and split it up into several different videos and do it over that. So perhaps something like, I don't know, the Punic Wars or American Civil War, something like that, instead of doing like what we've done so far, where we've taken several kind of disjointed things and put them together. But we might do one long series for a few weeks, see how that goes. We'll wait and see. But yes, thank you for everyone who's supported me so far. It's going great. I'm enjoying doing this, and yes, thank you very much. I've been Lozy, and thank you for watching History 3 Games.